Welcome. In this video we'll build an entire blog post application from scratch. The only thing I've prepared beforehand are the designs for the application. We'll start by building the front end and turning these designs into a Next.js application. Then we'll connect the Next.js app to a Headless CMS in the backend. We'll use Strapi as the Headless CMS. I have prepared two simple designs for the blog we're going to build. This is the list page, the home page of the blog, which will show a featured blog post and all other blog posts beneath it. And each blog will have a detail page, which will show the title and main content together with the larger featured image of the blog post. We'll start from the front end. I will create a Next application by running npx create next app, and I'll use the latest version. I'll call my project Headless blog. You can check out my detailed Next.js course if you're interested in Next. I would not like to use TypeScript. I will use ESLint. I don't need Tailwind, and I would recommend using a source directory. We will use the app router, the new app directory, as opposed to the pages router, of course, and you shouldn't need to modify the default import alias for a basic project like this. I'll wait for my project to bootstrap. My Next.js app is ready. I'll cd into the project directory and I will open it with Visual Studio Code. Here we have our bootstrap Next.js project. The first thing I'm going to do is run it with npm run dev to make sure that it is working correctly. It's running at localhost 3000 as it says in the terminal, and you can see the bootstrap Next.js application is working as expected and compiling successfully. Now the second thing we're going to do is clean up the bootstrapped code a bit. I'll delete this global CSS file. I will go to layout and remove the import from here. I will leave the interfont import from Next Fonts Google because we will use Google fonts, just not the interfont, but I'll keep these for now. As for the metadata, I'll modify it a bit. The title and remove the description for now. I want to rewrite my functions to arrow. And this root layout will be largely the same for now. Just HTML and body. And the children inside of the body. Of course, we need to export the root layout by default from this file. And this file will be left like this for now. Here in the home page, I will again rewrite it to an arrow function and remove everything from the markup. I will just leave a single div tag that says home to make sure the component is rendering correctly for now. Alright, I'll leave the fav icon for now. For this project I won't make a fav icon, so let's just leave it so that we don't get an error, it's not loading. I'll remove this page module CSS file as it's not used anymore. And in the public folder we have two SVG icons for the demo app, which we don't need anymore. Okay, now the project is clean enough and we're good to go. If I open it again, we just have the home component, the home page mounting, and our div thing home displaying correctly. Alright, so let's see the design and discuss how we're going to start. We have a header and footer in the main layout that are very simple, and a grid system. I've drawn a 12-column grid inside of a 1280 pixel container, pretty standard. So we'll start by implementing some main styles like typography, normalize, and the grid system, and then we'll build the header and footer. After that, we'll build the cart component, and this page will be pretty much ready. Okay, let's start with the main CSS files and normalize. I will install a couple of things from npm. I need SASS. I will use SASS as a preprocessor, primarily because Next.js has built-in support for it. You just need to install the SASS package and it will be enabled automatically. I will also install normalize CSS from npm. I will create a new folder inside of the source folder called styles. And here I'll have a styles SASS file which will import all modules. And the first module I'm going to import will actually be normalize from normalize CSS, the dependency, the npm package, And actually the file inside node modules is immediately inside the normalized CSS directory. Let me show you what that imports. I can use this because the npm package is called like that. And if I check my node modules and look for normalized CSS, you can see the folder, and inside of it we have the normalized CSS file, which we're importing right here. If I open it, here's the normalize. So essentially, if I run my project right now, nothing will happen, but if I import this style.sass file and I run my project, now we have a small error here. Let me check. Module not found. I have a typo. It should be styles.sass. And I can already see normalize is loaded because we don't have margin on the body. But if I check the layout CSS file, we can see that the normalized CSS is right here. Great. So our SASS setup is working and we have normalized. The next step will be to add a global SASS file or any other global side effects, modifications, and normalizations. I will import that as well. I can just say globals because it's in the same directory and it's a SASS file in this case. And the first thing I'm going to do is set box sizing to border box for all elements and pseudo elements. Pretty standard to normalize the box model. And yeah, that will be the globals file for now. We'll add some other body styles here later. The next step will be to set up the grid system, the 12 column grid. For that, I'll make another file called grid.sass. And here I'll first make a container. Let me open calculator real quick. So basically the width of the container is 1280, but I want a 20 pixel padding on both sides so that it can scale widely on mobile devices. So I need to add this 20 pixels to the overall width. So our container should have a max width of 1320 and a 20 pixel left and right padding. Lastly, I will set margin left and right to auto so that it centers. And that's the container done. Next, in a grid system, we need a row. I will do a flex grid. The direction of the flex display flex is row by default, so we don't need to specify that. Now, there are many ways to set up the gutter. We do have a 30 pixel gutter here in that grid system, meaning the spacing between the columns. What I'll do is negative margin left on the row. I will also set width to 100% plus 30 pixels, who will allow me to now on the co-class, it should have flex set to 1 so that it grows and expands, and I can set padding to 15 pixels. Now this is one way to do it. You can also just set gap to 30 pixels, but then the width calculations of the columns would be a little bit more complex later. So this is the approach I'll take. There are many ways to implement a grid system. You can also use a ready-made grid, like the Bootstrap grid or many other grids available online. There are both flex grids and others. Here we also need to set flex wrap to wrap so that it wraps if the width is not enough. And now we need to actually generate columns here. I would like to have this syntaxis code co1 through co12, where each will set a width of a certain percentage, where co12 will be 100%, co6 will be 50, etc. Pretty standard grid. For that, I'll do a for loop. SASS. There we go. This is the for loop syntaxis. And we will do it from 1 through 12. True means inclusive in SASS, actually. Let me close the docs. Okay, and for each entry, we will generate a class with string interpolation, and that class will set min width to. We need to first calculate 100% divided by the number of columns, in that case 12, and then multiply that by the current iteration. You could do that calculation beforehand and just hard code it here, but it's not a good approach because it will be less understandable. And we need to set max width to the same value. In this case, setting max width and min width is not the same as just setting width because we're working with a flex container. That's why we need to set both. And this should be the grid ready. Let me just check if the classes have been generated properly by just going to DevTools and testing them. I will set some of them and they don't seem to be generated. Let me see. I haven't imported grid in my style. Okay. Now we have a call 1. Call 6 is 50% and call 12 is 100, as you can see. Great. And call sets flex to 1. And the padding. Awesome. So my grid is ready. We will be able to test it thoroughly when we get to the point to use it, but I'm sure it will be working correctly because it's a very straightforward grid. Okay, next up, let's do some global style update. The background is actually, the entire site is actually not white. It's a very subtle shade of gray, which I'll set in globals. Okay, great. And the fonts used, let's set that up next, are Lato for the headings, the H1, H2, etc. And Open Sans for the body text, where the body text actually has a color that is not black, but the headings are black. So let's set the body text color here in globals. Great. And let's set up the fonts. I'll do that in the main layout. As I mentioned, we need Lato and Open Sans from Google Fonts. I'll initialize both right here. Okay, and Open Sans the same way, just initialize the function. Okay, for Lato, I might need to specify weights. Let me check. Yeah, missing weights for Lato. Well, for Open Sans, I don't have that issue because it's now a variable font. For Lato, I'll specify only 400, 700, and 900 as weight, be strings, as you can see in my terminal. I need only these because I'm using it for headlines. We don't need the thin font weights. And I will also specify the variable setting because I want a CSS variable for both of these. This will be called font later. And I'll set one for Open Sans, which will of course be font Open Sans. Great. And now we need to set the class names to the body. Here I will have multiple class names now. First I'll set Open Sans class name so that the body sets the font to Open Sans by default, the font family. And now I will add the classes for the variables using Open Sans variable and Lato variable. And now if I test, first of all, my body text should be Open Sans. And it is. And I will also have my variables. There they are, for font open sans and font lato, ready to use. Okay, that's awesome. Now let's create a typography file, which I will also import. And here we'll define some typography styles. First, I'll set the base font size to 18 pixels on the HTML and body. And the font family is already set on the body, so no need to do that. After that, I'll do some basic paragraph styles. I'll reset the margins to 30 pixels bottom only, and I'll set line height to 1.66. I will now style all headings, and I will create classes for each heading as well, so that I can use the heading styles without the actual heading tag. And the headings will first be black. That's a major difference. They will have a font family of my lato variable and a font weight of 600 by default. So they'll be bold. And that's pretty much their basic style set. I will also set their baseline height to 1.25. And now we need to set the sizes for each heading, starting with H1, which I can check in my design. It's 52. I will come to my editor and open calculator. 52 divided by 18 is 2.88 rems. Okay, let's do H2. I actually don't have an H2 on this page. I have it here. It's 43. 2.388. Okay. Let's go for the H3 now. This is its style. It's 34. That's 1.88. Let's go forward. This is my H4 style. 24 pixels. Let me check. 1.33. And my H5 should be 20, I believe. Let me see. No, it's actually 18 and 16. Yeah. So my H5 has a font size. Yeah, sorry, my H5 has a font size of 20, which is 1.11. And my H6 has a font size of 1 rem. These are my headings done, exactly as in the design. I will also reset all margins on the headings. I will set margins individually for each heading. Only keep the default margin on the paragraphs. Okay, this is the basic typography done. I will now create the header and footer components. What I'll do for that is create a new folder in app called components. And I'll start with the header.js file. Here I'll create a React component for my header, which will be exported by default, of course. It will have a header tag, a container, and as you can see, my header here, it has just a simple headline. All right. Now I will use this component in my main layout. Here we have our body tag and the children. And above it, I can add my header component, like so. Great. And here it is. Let me zoom to 100%. And our component has a font size of 52 pixels, line height of 64. Let me check if the line height should be like this. No. Okay. So now we need some spacing above and below the heading in the form of padding. The spacing is 80 pixels, both sides. I will create some spacing utilities for that. I'll create a utils folder and create a spacing file, URL, and I will import that. Okay. And I will need top and bottom paddings. For that, I'll create maps in SASS, just some lists actually, which will list the paddings I will need. For now, that will be 80, but I will need more as we implement this layout. And then I'll iterate through this list. And for each iteration, I will generate a class, which will be pt-the value, in this case 80. And that will just set padding top to the appropriate pixels. So this code right now will just generate this. And it's a little bit overdone for just this property, but if I need to add one more padding top class, I will just write it right here. So it scales a little bit better. And I'll do the same thing for the bottom class. Okay. Now I will make sure that's imported. Yes, and let's see if my classes are generated and working. All right, they seem to be working perfectly, actually. Okay, let's add them permanently to the header. I will zoom out the page a bit so that we can see it better. All right, I need to refresh. Great. So that's basically my header done, actually. Now I'll focus on the footer. It's also very simple, as you can see. Just basic horizontal line and some copyright paragraph text. Let's create the component. I will use the footer tag. And again, I will add a container. And here the basic markup is quite straightforward. Horizontal line and copyright text. Great. Add it to my layout. I'll import it. And add it right here. Okay, now it should be welded right here. And it is. Now what I need to do is style the default horizontal line because it's has a little bit of a different style than in my design. Here in the design, we have an opacity, black border with opacity 10. So a little bit overkill, but I'll create a separate file for it to keep up with one file per component. It doesn't really hurt anything. And I'll just set border color to black with opacity 10%. And import this file. All right, a horizontal line is set. I will also reset its default spacings right here. And the paragraph, as it starts, it's actually exactly as it should be, I believe, in the design. Let me check again. Hide the grid real quick. Yeah. Okay, we need some spacings here. I believe the space between those two is 30 pixels. Yes, that's exactly right. So I will add margin bottom utilities in my spacings file. This will be used a lot. I'll again create a map. And we'll need only 30 for now. All right. And this will set margin bottom. That's all. Now I will actually immediately set that class to my footer component. to my HR actually. And here we go. I have my spacing set correctly. Now the last thing I'll do, I have spacing on my paragraph, so yeah, my footer is pretty much done. Now, here in the home, we just have a simple div for now, but we can start focusing on the home page, which will include a simple cart component. Maybe not so simple. I will make one cart component that will be used both for this featured blog post and these blog posts using container queries because they will also scale well. I'll show you right now how that will work. We will start by implementing the larger cart component and then write container queries so that it scales down. Okay. To do so, in my components folder, I'll create a cart folder. This is because my cart component will have both JavaScript and a module styles file. And I'll create a JavaScript component, a React component first. Okay, and I will also import styles from the cart module style. So the cart will have a wrapper with a cart class name. The markup will be very simple. We need this kind of layout where the image will take 50% of the space and the content another 50% with a 30 pixels gap between them. I will not use the grid for this so that I can scale with container queries without applying side effects to the grid system. I think this is better design. So for the image, I need a couple of wrappers actually. I'll call them cart image wrap. And then I will need, and lastly, the image. Now I need all of these two wrappers because I also need to set it to a 16:9 aspect ratio. And I will need a separate wrapper for that in order to scale it later. Now I won't use the image tag. I will actually use the image component from next image because it will also optimize my image. All right. We also need a node tag, of course, a node attribute, of course. And for now, I will just load one of my images statically. I actually have prepared my exports right here from my design, just the thumbnails and featured images. And I will move these to my project in the public folder. And as they're in the public folder, I can just load one of these thumbnails, this one, like this, thumb featured article webp. And I'll write thumbnail as the alt text for now. In next image, I can set fill to true. This will make the image position absolute and make it expand to its parent. In this case, to its position relative parent, which doesn't exist right now. So to take over the whole page, take a look. It won't because the cart is not used anywhere, but it will later. And after my image wrapper, I will need a wrapper for my content, which I'll call cart content. Inside of it, we have a couple of textual fields. We first have a label for the category. I'll call it label. And it will have the hard-coded value of product reviews for now. Next, we'll have the title, which will have the cart title class and also to have a style of h3. And I'll hard-code the title as well for now. All of these values will later be used as props and taken from the Headless CMS eventually. Next, we have a summary right here, which will have then a class of cart summary. And the last thing is the button, which I will not add for now. I'll make a separate component once we style our cart. Okay. Let's actually import and use this cart in my page so that we can view it and test it. I will import it from here. All right. Okay. I will add a container here and just the cart component inside. I'll also set some padding bottom to separate it from the footer temporarily. So right now the image is taking over the whole view because we don't have a position relative there. That is until we style it. So let's start doing the styles. Starting from cart. Cart needs to be display flex. It needs to have flex direction of row for now because the content is horizontally. The layout is horizontal, and we will set a gap of 30 pixels in this case because it will work well. And here we're pretty much done with the main layout. I need to also set border radius of 10 pixels and overflow hidden so that the border radius is applied to all inner elements that are overflowing. And lastly, we have some box shadow here, which is 21 pixel spread with 7% opacity. So let's apply that. It's a black shadow like this. Okay. Next up, we need to set the layout on these two inner elements, the image wrap and content, which should have a flex 1 to expand so that both expand to 50%. And that's it for them for now. The cart image will have a position relative. It will have width of 100% and aspect ratio 16:9. I also set min height to 100% so that if the aspect ratio is calculation of height is less than the overall height of the cart, it will actually stand higher. You see how that will work in a bit. As that, I'll set object fit cover to the image inside of that wrapper. If we test that out now, you can see this is starting to look a little bit like it. So here's how that works. Here we have our cart flex container with a 30 pixel gap. The image wrap so far just has flex 1 to expand to 50% as well as its other sibling, the content. And inside the image wrap, we have this cart image wrapper, which has position relative and the aspect ratio of 16:9. Now we have a min height of 100%, so the cart image wrapper has an aspect ratio of 16:9, but also a min height. This means that if this content grows more than the image height, the image will disobey the aspect ratio rule and expand more so that it looks nice. All right. Now the next thing I need to set is the actual padding here on the cart content. As we have a gap, we don't need padding left. Otherwise, the spacing around it is consistent at 30 pixels. And just the left value will be 0. Also, cart content should be vertically centered compared to the image, which I'll do right now by setting the display to flex, the direction to column, and I'll justify the content center. There we go. Great. Now all we have to do is style the inside component of cart content. The label is a heading with size 18, which means an H6 style. Let's apply that right now. Besides that, it has a bottom margin of 10 pixels and an orange color. So let's add both the spacing first. In margin bottom, I'll add 10, and in cart, I'll add the class. Let's check that out. There we go. Now I will add some utilities for color, which I'll call colors. And the first one will be orange. Okay, I'll import that in my style, and I can use it now, right here. Now, this will not just be orange, depending on the content of the category, product reviews, opinions, travel guides. We have to change the color with a map, depending on the value of the category. But we'll do that later. Now, the next item is the title, which is an H3. I already have that style applied. Let's just check the other properties. It has a line height of 42, which I believe is correct. Yes. And it doesn't have any margin bottom, and it should be 20. So I'll just add that to the spacing utils right here and apply it right here. All right. And my paragraph text is 18. Actually, my paragraph is not a paragraph right now. So I need to change that real quick so that it has proper line height and font size 18. And here I need to set the font weight to semi-bold, which I'll do by adding a utility for that. I'll call it fonts, pro font utilities, and let's create a list for that as well. Okay, so FW, the value, and then that will set the font weight. You can also use a framework like Tailwind, which will provide ready-made utilities for you. That would be a great choice in many cases, so that you don't have to write utilities yourself. I prefer to do so. Let me see. We have the class. We haven't imported it right here. Okay, good. We have a default margin bottom of 30 pixels. Let's check if that is correct by design. I do believe so, yeah. Yeah, that is. Okay, now we have to create the button component. To do so, I will create another folder in my components folder right here, right next to cart, called button. This is because our button will also have a module.sass file and a React component. Okay, I'll import the styles. All right, my button will actually have to check its props, and if a href prop is available, it will return an anchor tag, actually a next link component, not a pure anchor tag. So if props href is here, it will return our link. Props children, and the href will be equal to props href. Otherwise, it will return a button. This way, the button will be reusable as both a link and a button element. Okay. Now, I will actually use it in cart. Check that functionality first. Import it. I will set an href to it and a value of read more. And it seems to be working correctly. Okay, the button has very straightforward styles. It's a pill-shaped button. The only interesting thing about it is the icon, probably. It has consistent spacing of 10 pixels top and 18 pixels to the side, which I'll round to 20. And the basic font size of 18. And lay to both. Okay, let's start writing the styles for it. For that, I'll set a class name to both the link and the button, because they need to look consistent. And that will be button, the class. Here, I'll create that. The button will have a display of inline flex. I want to flex the layout so that I can position the icon and the text node correctly. We have a gap here of 10 pixels. The direction is row. We don't want any wrapping. And we want to actually align items center so that the items are centered on the vertical axis. Okay. The padding, as mentioned, is 10 pixels top and 20 pixels to the side, which is 1 point. Okay. And the font weight, the font family first. Will be font later, and the font weight will be 600, the default ones. We also have border radius of 100 pixels because it's a pill-shaped button. We need a larger value here than it will ever get. And we need to get the background color from our design software. This blue shade. The text color will be FFF. I also need to set width to max content. And that should pretty much, yeah, styles are now pretty good. Here in the font properties, I'll set line height to 0.75. And because the text won't wrap on 2 lines ever. At least that's not how the component is meant to be used. And text decoration should be set to none. I will also reset border in case the component is used with its button property. Now we also need some change on the hover. I'll just change the background color to a darker shade. And I'll add a transition to it. Pretty standard stuff. Okay. And now we need to do the icon. The icon, I have it exported as an SVG in the public folder. I'll just copy the SVG and we need it inline. For that, I'll create another component here. And I will use one approach to make sure other icons would be usable in the future. Here, this button icon component will check the icon type prop. And if that is arrow right, it will return this SVG element right here. Otherwise, it will return no. And we can add other icons here the same way. Now, the last thing I'll change is instead of passing this string as the prop, I will make some kind of a constant object that will serve as an enumerable. I'll call it icon types and export it from this file, where I'll have an arrow right value that is set to this exact string. And you'll see how that can be used right now. There we go. And let's expand this to a multi-line JSX. Here we will have a button icon component, which will have an icon type prop of props icon passed to the button. Okay, great. Now nothing will change because we haven't passed the props icon prop, but if I go to my cart component where I initialize my button, I can first import icon types from button. I can actually do that here. And I can just say icon arrow right. All right, great. And I have my icon. It's not very pretty right now. Let's modify the markup a little bit. First of all, the fill of this path should always be current color. Let's set it to white. And let's see the width and height of this icon. It's 12 pixels. Okay. Now I'll set these to M values so that they scale better. Let's see if everything is working correctly. Okay. And now because they're M values, if I change the font size here, the icon is scaling proportionally. Okay. Well, that certainly works great. And we have prepared the component to support other icon types. Besides arrow right, we just have to add the inline SVG and the icon type right here and in the enum. Okay, great. So now the next step to write the container query so that we can turn this large featured cart into this cart at a certain width. We'll start by going to the cart module and writing a container query right here. A container query is like a media query, except that it doesn't watch the viewport, but another container which you specify, and it accepts max and min width values. Now I need to determine a max width value based on how this component is laid out. I think a value of around 700 pixels for the actual item, for the actual container here, will be great. Because this is 660 and 700 looks like this. Pretty great. Below that, I would want to go to a vertical layout. I'll set a max width to 700 pixels. Now, the container query doesn't know what the container is until you tell it. So for that reason, I'll add another wrapper here to serve as that container for my container query. I'll explain why I need that extra wrapper in a bit, and I'm not using cart. You will see. And here I will style that first, cart wrap. Container type is how we define a new container. In the properties, you can look up in MDN. I need an inline size container. These properties determine from where the container query will have, from which value it will determine the width from which you're specifying the max and min width queries. And I will use inline size. You can check out very detailed explanations about these values in MDN. So now my card wrap right here is defined as the container, and I can write a container query for it using one of its children, in this case cart. This is exactly why I needed a secondary wrapper, because I actually need to modify this element, the cart, and its layout to a column layout on a certain container in my container query. And I can't do that if it is the container itself. Okay. So first thing, most importantly, my cart will change its direction to column. And that really makes a difference. As you can see below 700 pixels, we change the column. And now we need to make very minor adjustments. The image will automatically be right because it's 16 by 9 and it scales great. Our gap is kept at 30 pixels. I just need to now modify the cart content paddings because of that gap. The paddings will now be 0 top and 30 pixels on all other sides. All right, we're almost ready. The last part, to modify the font sizes a bit of these elements. First, the label becomes 16 from 18. Let me check if that worked. Yes. The title becomes 24. All right. The summary is hidden completely. So display none. And the button stays the same. And that's it. My cart now ready. Let me check. It scales flawlessly. Let's zoom out a bit. Great. And now I can use it in a grid beneath the featured post to achieve this 3-column layout. So let's build that. I'll add a row and 3 columns, which will have a class of co and co4. Duplicate these. Now add a card to each one of them. Great. We also need a couple of things on the card. Right now everything is hard-coded, so we need to pass all of these values as props. And I also want to be able to pass a CSS class. To do so, I will add the props parameter, and I'll start with the CSS class prop on the topmost wrapper. Sorry, not CSS class name first. And now let's do checks for each one of these. First of all, to achieve that, I will add a new helper component, which I'll call conditional renderer. It will be a very simple component to do the following. It will have a condition prop and its children. And if the condition is true, it will return its children. Otherwise, it will return null. I use that to render conditionally JSX elements in order not to use ternary too much. You could write such a component easily, probably one that is also less verbose, because this is quite a long name, and the prop name is also quite long, but I prefer that. I prefer understandable verbose code that is a little bit longer. Okay, so the condition would be props a label in this case, and in that case, we'll render the label. And the label disappears immediately because none of my cards have a props label. Let's add one. Okay. I think I have a typo somewhere. Yeah. All right. And I'll do the same thing for all other fields. Here, we will ask for a title prop. All right. Let's add that as well. All right. Great. Next, the summary prop. The same thing. All right. I will copy my summary again because I lost it in my clipboard. All right. Check it right here. And for the button, we'll render the button if there is an href prop. That href prop will, of course, be the href property of the button. We also need to set icon to button. And as for the label of the button, if props button a label is set, we'll use that. Otherwise, it will default to read more. All right. Now let's set the button props to my card component right here to test them. Ref button icon. I will need to move my icon types import to here. All right. And button icon is icon types, arrow right. And I will not set the label because it should be read more for now. Okay, awesome. Everything is passed as props. I will copy this card to the bottom grid and reload. Yeah, great. I will also set margin bottom. Let me see, from where is this spacing coming right now? Oh, my code padding is wrong. That's why I have spacing. Let me open the grid style. Yeah, this shouldn't set top padding, only side for the gutter. Yeah, and I need margin bottom 30 in this specific case on my topmost card. Great. All right. This is working flawlessly so far. Now the next step, the last thing I need for my cards, is this label should change its color depending on its inner content. So here's how I'll implement that. I'll add a helper function to determine the color. I'll create a new helpers folder in source, and I'll call it get label get category color. It will export a function. All right, this function will use a map which I'll define in this file, category color map. It will be a JavaScript map, and we will set values to it. First of all, product reviews will return orange. Opinions will return green, and I believe travel guides will return purple. And what will function? This function will return category color map get category. That's all. This is a very frequently used design pattern in front end, using some kind of a map to return values in constant algorithmic time. Okay, so let's use that in the card component. I will import get category color, my helper, and I'll use it right here in the color utility. I'll say get category color based on props label. And now if I go right here and refresh, I still get product reviews all the way because all of these haven't been updated. Let's update that to opinions. And this one to travel guides, as is in the design. And right now they're black because I don't have my classes, but they're here. Let's define the classes in the colors CSS file, find my styles, colors. Okay, and I need green and purple. Let's take the colors for them real quick. This will be the green, and this will be the purple. Okay, let's refresh, and our mapping is working correctly, and the cards are done. The last thing I'll do is some utility for responsive scaling of these cards, because they never collapse to the columns. Currently never collapse to full width. I will add some responsive util for that, which I will do in a new width file. It will be responsive max utility, which I will call min width 100%. It will just set min width to 100%. Okay, and I'll import that. Now I can use it in my layout on my call force, and they should scale well. Now check out one side effect that's very cool. I first will add the margin bottom to all of them as well. Now when they scale down at 800 pixels, the bottom ones also turn to the horizontal layout because they are larger than 700 pixels, and that actually looks great because they would look very bad as cards. vertical cards in this case. And this is one very cool side effect of container queries. Your layouts become extremely fluid, and they are optimal at every width of the browser. Okay, and with that, this homepage, which lists blocks, should be done pretty much. Let me zoom out to check it out in entirety. We currently have a repetitive content in the same thumbnail, but that doesn't matter for the layout. It will change when we use the Headless CMS later. Okay, so far so good. Now we will turn our attention to the details page. I will first close some of these files. The details page will be a dynamic route in Next. I'll use swag for it because it will be used for individual blog posts. And I'll create a page.js file, just copy this one. Although we don't really need any of this content. I'll call it the component blog details, and I'll remove all of the markup for now, except the container, because I'll need that. Okay, let's access it. To access it, just type any dynamic route. There we go. So I have the header and the footer, and we need to work on these elements right here. Very simple layout. The only interesting thing right here is that some of the content is constrained to, I believe, 9. Let me check. 9 columns so that it's easier to read. The thumbnail is full, the featured image is full width. Okay. We can actually copy some of the components like the label and the title. Because they'll be using the same utilities. We can copy them from our cart component right here. I'll copy the label. The only difference being we don't need this style for the container query, but I will need that get category color coding, so I'll import it. All right. Props label, this will be different later, but for now I will just hard code it so that we can see the label, and it's great. Now in this design it needs to have a margin bottom of 20 pixels. Okay. Next up is the title. It is an H2, and I will, let's measure its spacing. It's 50 pixels. I need to add that in my spacing utilities for margin bottom. And so far, so good. So next I will add a 9 column constraint right here. To do that, I'll need a row and a call9 class. And we add these right here. All right, great. Now let's add the image. It will be underneath the row. I'll actually move this spacing to the row. Okay. I will again use next image, of course. And I have the thumbnail in my public folder. It's called, how is it called? Featured image 1. All right. It should have a fill property probably. No, actually it doesn't. No. Okay, I'm getting an error. I need to specify my width. I need to, of course. So we have 1280 by 387. Let's do that. Awesome. Here's my featured image. I will add some styles to it. To do so, I will add a CSS module. It will be featured image, the class. It needs a border radius of 10 pixels, and I will also apply it with the same shadow I'm using on the car. Although I think I missed that in the design, it will look nice, in my opinion, and consistent. And let's apply that class name. First, I'll need to import the styles. Featured image is the class. Let's check it out. Okay, works great. Now I need spacing beneath it as well. Again, 50 pixels. I think I'll measure it right now, just sure. Yeah, exactly. All right. And let's see. We have 50 pixels spacing. And what's left is the content. To do that, I will copy the col9 layout. We need the image. Okay. And it will be just a few paragraphs. Two standard paragraphs right here. Let me just copy them. Okay. It's hard-coded right now, so the content doesn't matter at all. We will pull all of this content from a rich text field in our Headless CMS. But at this stage, we have our contents, my featured image, and this sales page is completely ready, just as the design. Alright, we're done with the front-end part, and the next part is to set up a Headless CMS. So we will use Strapi for the CMS. I'll go to the docs immediately. Strapi is a Headless CMS, and we'll go to the developer docs and the quick start guide. We need to create a new application here, so I'll start my terminal, go to my source folder. All right, so I copied the npx string to create a Strapi app. I'll call my app block CMS. This is the project name, of course. And Strapi will create a quick start project now and install dependencies. Okay, Strapi bootstrapped and run the application. We get this screen, and it guides us to go to the admin panel and create the first administrator. It started an app at localhost 1337. And here we have to create our admin user, which I'll do real quick. It needs to have one uppercase character. All right. And we're already in our Strapi Headless CMS. Strapi is very simple to use and extremely powerful. The first thing we can see are the plugins, Content Type Builder and Media Library. Media Library is very straightforward. Here you can add media assets, which include videos, images, and files. In the Content Type Builder, we create content types, and in fact, we have one collection already, users. Users and content types in general are a collection of fields. In this case, username, email, password, etc. Each of these fields has a type. Very straightforward. If you've created modules or content types in any content management system, here is the same way, although greatly simplified for ease of use. We also have single types and components. Single types are a type which holds only one instance. Users, for example, if we go to the content management, we can create multiple users with multiple entries. Single types will have the defined fields by you, but they will have only one instance. Components are a special collection of fields which you can reuse. If you find yourself using the same couple of fields for many types, you can create a component for that. For now, we'll just create a new collection type for our blocks, which will be called blocks. I need to enter its singular API ID and its plural ID. In advanced settings, we can also allow internationalization if you have multiple languages, and enable or disable drafts. I want drafts, so just create a content type real quick. Okay, and next we can create fields. I'll start with the most basic field, which will be the block title. It will be a short text field. In advanced settings, I don't want the default value, but I want it to be required, unique, and I want it to have a maximum length 255. And here we have a title field with basic validation. I want to add another field. Let me check my block real quick. So my block has title, it has a category, product reviews, and others. And that category, I want to set to a enumeration, and it will be called category. And here we list values, one value per line. We'll have product reviews, opinions, and travel guides. In validation, we'll make it a required field, and that's it. So we have our category. I also need a text field that's long text, and it will be a summary. Again, it will be required to have a maximum length of 255. This summary will be used right here in the card featured item description. So we also need a flag that's going to be a Boolean field, and it's going to be is featured if a blog post should be featured on the homepage. And it will be required. The default value will be false. Another field will of course be the thumbnail and the list image. Let's add both of these. It will be a media field. First we'll add the thumbnail, single media. I will allow only images, and it will be required. I will also add a featured image. It will be single media. Again, only an image and required field. Okay, these are the two image fields. Let me open the details page real quick. The last item, I believe, is the content, which will be a rich text field, content, and it won't have any validation. Okay, we're good to go. Press save. Strapi will need to restart to apply new fields. And now we have our blocks collection. We can add a block through Content Manager. We go to the block type and press create new entry. And here we have the editor to create a new blog post. So let's create a new blog post. It will be this one right here. For example, I need a title. It will be a product review. Let's add its summary right here. It will be a featured blog post. Let me add its thumbnail from my source folder. There we have it. We can upload it. And I can add the featured image as well. Okay, good. Okay, we have our two images. And the last thing is the content, which is rich text markdown field, which means I can add my HTML to it. 3 paragraphs. Here they are. Great. And I can now save my blog post. I also need one more field. Publish it. I need to add a field I forgot. We need a field for swag, which would be a short text field for the URL of the blog post. It's a required field with a max length 250. Save that. Go to Content Manager, edit my blog post to add the required swag field. My swag will be like the title with lowercase and dashes. Very standard. Okay. Save. Now we have to test the API. For that, I will open Postman before I attempt to use Next.js. And my API endpoint will be localhost 1337. There we go. -API. And in Strapi, you can access a content type by the API ID in plural. So in this case, that will be box. What's important is I need authorization. Here in settings, we have API tokens, and I need to generate a new token. I will make it an unlimited token and read only. And I'll copy the key. Now to authorize, we send an authorization bearer token here. You see how to do that in the HTTP request headers later. So now if I make the get request, I get my blog post. If you noticed, I get a title, category, summaries, featured, and content, but I don't see the featured image because they are kind of a related field. To do that, I need to set populate parameter to everything. And then I will get all of my images and related fields. But the request will be a little bit slower. As you can see, for the image, we get the URL and image title. Great. Now I can use this API request in my Next.js app. first, let's do a little bit of a setup here. The first thing we need to do is add our API token in an environment variable. Let me copy it from right here. This shouldn't be pushed to a GitHub repository or anywhere. It should be kept secure. This environment variable should be set by your deployment process and initially and ideally taken from a secret repository in your deployment tool. So we have that environment variable. The next thing is I will need a config file, which I'll set up in my source directory, where we will have an object, and it will have the API endpoint, which is currently 1337. Good. And now I can actually make a request. Let's go to the homepage first, where we'll retrieve all blocks. I will first write the request function here and then extract it to a helper. I'll call it fetch blocks. It will be an async function. It will fetch, and I will import the config from config, and here we will fetch from config API. Let me check if that's the correct. Yeah, /API /blocks, and I'll set that parameter now. We will need to pass it as an argument later. You'll see why. And I'll add request options object in order to add the authorization bearer header. So here we have headers, and I need an authorization header, which will have the following value: bearer, empty space, and the environment variable. There we go. These are the request options we need. So the response will be awaited as well as JSON, and then this fetchbox function will return the response. Very straightforward. No error handling yet. Okay, and my home component will use this function by making it async and using fetch blocks. Okay, for now, let's just console log the result to test everything. I will run the app and just mount the homepage real quick. Let's see. Okay, we get a 403 forbidden error, which means we have a problem with our API key, basically. Let me see. We get our environment variables loaded right here from .env, and the API token environment variable is here, but I use post-invalid API key. I need to use API token. Let's check again now. We get forbidden again. So I have a typo in headers, of course. And now we get it immediately. Data and metadata. So if I console log, let me just remove the logging. Yeah. If I console log data, I get my blocks, which is just one block right now. Now, in this case, I need to fetch my featured blocks first, as you can see right here, my featured block, and then the other block. So we need to use Strapi to query by field. Let's see how that works. Here we have the REST API, and we can find the interactive query builder. Basically, we need a filter. We can generate it from here. It's not a very complex syntax. I can just copy this and modify it on the go. So to fetch the featured blocks, I need to filter by the isFeatured field, and it needs to equal true. Okay, and now I will only get featured blocks. Test that. If we refresh, I get one block. I will change. Let me change real quick in my CMS. I will change my block, not be featured. And now if I refresh and go to the console, actually let's restart the app. Sure. Now on port 3001, I still get my blog post. And this featured is still true. Let me see if I saved my change. I do think so. Yeah, it is saved. Okay, let's refresh again. Okay, this was basically a caching issue with Next.js. As soon as I invalidate the cache, I now get an empty box array. Now I will make this featured, and we need to pass these parameters as an additional argument in the function. So I'll set that to params and we'll pass them right. All right. And now I can use the parameters to fetch the featured blocks and the normal blocks. All right. And I'll do that with promise all for performance so that I can do it concurrently. The normal blocks can be fetched by filtering by is featured false. Okay. And this will be done with promise all, and we'll do both. And now I have featured blocks and all other blocks right here. I need to await my promise. Great. To test that, I will create a non-featured blog post right here. I'll just duplicate this one to be easier. Okay. I'll just make it the title to 2 and featured to false for now. All right. Great. And now I can use these blocks. Let's first show the featured block. I'll do that by mapping featured blocks data, and for each block I will return JSX, and this JSX will just be discard. Okay. And now set all attributes one by one. First of all, label will be featured block attributes category. All right. The title will be title. Summary will of course be summary. The href will be the swag. Actually, it will be / the swag. The icon is arrow right always. Let's test that real quick. We don't get our featured block. Let me see why. All right. Let me first check if we have a featured block even. We do. We have to publish this one as well. Not forget. Let me see. Here in the content, it's not rendering. Featured blocks data. Let's console log that. See where the currently empty. I think I need to, yeah, invalidate the cache again. Okay. And I get my featured block. That's great. The swag is just not rendering correctly because it's with lowercase, and that's actually good. Let it be like that for now. Okay. Great. All other fields are showing correctly. I just don't have my image, I think. Yeah. The image is currently the default one. I need to change my cart component for that. I think I forgot that part. Exactly. I need image source and image out. So this will be props image source, and this will be props image out. Great. And let's take the image. To do so, I'll set image out to featured image, and image source will be right here. Featured block attributes, featured image data attributes URL. A little bit long, but it is what it is. And this will be only the last segment of the URL. So that thing can be taken from config API /upload, I believe. Let me see now. First of all, okay, we have the upvotes part in the URL, so we don't need that. And a /. Otherwise, let's test this URL. We do have an error. I'll explain in a bit. That's expected. I just want to test if my URL is correct. Yeah. The error is that this domain is not allowed in Next.js. And here is a link on how to fix it in the next config. We just have to add this as an allowed URL right here. Image remote pattern, HTTP, and our local address for now. You will just enter the URL of your Headless CMS here, if you load images from there. Okay, now if we reload, we get our image. Great. Okay. Now the featured images taken from the Headless CMS. Let's take the other images from there as well. In order to do so, I will copy this map. We also need a key here. That's very important because we're iterating in React. The key will be the ID of the block. Okay. And here we'll do the same map for blocks. Okay. One minor difference being we will also create a column here like so. Otherwise, we also need a key, this time on the column. I'll move it back because it's less important. And we can copy pretty much all of the properties here in the cart. Just change featured block to block and featured image to thumbnail. And we should be good. Let's check that out. Okay, the key is still using featured block. Let's change that. And here we go. We have our first cart taken from the Headless CMS. We have the image, the content, and everything seems to be working absolutely correctly. Awesome. That's great news. I can actually even remove summary here. Or no, leave it because sometimes it can show when scaling down. I'll remove the hard-coded cards beneath that. Awesome. Well, now I have a homepage pretty much ready. If I create more posts that are non-featured, for example, one that's called 3 and one that's called 4, they even publish them, they will draw a 5 populate right here. I can make more and they should actually scale pretty well. Whoops. Even publish them. There we go. Pretty awesome. Let me delete that last one. Now we should be able to open these and view their contents in detail. From this read more button, I get to the page, but it's right now, all of this is static content. So let's change that real quick. Also, let's test the labels. I see I don't have my labels right here, actually. Let me see, where is the mistake? Attributes category. I see that I passed them. Oh, I have a typo. There we go. Let's test my labels. I'll change that to opinions. Oops. And this one to travel guide. They should be working flawlessly. So F5, travel guides, opinions. Awesome. Okay. Let's turn our attention to the detail page. Very interesting here. We have to do a couple of things. First, we're getting the swag as a prop in props params. Because this is a Next.js dynamic route, let me show you real quick what I mean exactly. I will actually just output it as the heading right now. That will be easier. Props params swag. Now, if that is set to the title, look, we have the swag. This will be whatever we input as the dynamic route. So we have the swag. We need to basically retrieve a blog post by this swag. To do that, I will extract this fetch blocks function to a separate helper because now we'll be using it in 2 components. And I need to move some in the config file. That just test if it is working correctly. Real quick, we have some error. Config is not defined. Where? Oh, I need the config here as well because of the images. Okay, all working correctly. And now I can use that in my dynamic route as well. Just import fetch box. Okay, so we have the swag in props param swag. And what we need to do is walk will just be await, turn this into an async function, fetch box, and then we need to filter by the swag this time. Let's just copy the filtering syntax because I don't remember it. Okay. This time we'll filter by swag and it should be equal to, turn this, it should be equal to props params swag. And let's first console log that, make sure we're getting one blog post. Book has to be unique. Let's check if it's set to unique. That's important. It's not. It should be. Let me check if my blog posts have a unique swag right now. They don't. I need to do that because I hadn't edited properly the first time. They need to have a unique swag, otherwise the whole thing won't work. Need unique URLs for each item. Okay. And we get our blog post. Only one, it seems. Yeah. Great. Yeah, my blog will basically be the first item. I'll do a check. Just return no for now. Ideally, that thing would redirect to a 404 page, basically. Okay, and now we have our blog here. The great thing is we can just now output the attributes. This will be the category. Let's do that real quick. Okay, this will be the title. Awesome. Now we need the featured image. Let me just take that to multiple lines because it's too big already. All right. Featured image and its source will be what? The same as right here. I'll just copy it for convenience. I need config for config API. Here we have walk, attributes featured image, data attributes URL. Okay. Rest of the settings stay the same. Okay, that's done. And last but not least, the content. And for the content, we'll use dangerously set HTML in React. Let me just check the syntax of that property. Okay. All right, here it is. Now this should be a property used very carefully. You could use other solutions like React Markdown, for example, but this is how you insert HTML rich text into an element in React. And the data will be our content, which will be bulk attributes content. Let's check that out now. I think we've done it correctly. Let me just check that because, yeah, cached is the actual content from the page, from the Headless CMS. And at this stage, we have our book ready. If you go to the home page, we have multiple blog posts. And if I invalidate the cache, proper swags, we can open them. You see two opinion. We have our travel guide here. All of them open and the content is displayed. Now, one thing we can add as optimization is currently these items are dynamically retrieved server side. The individual items are fetched based on the swag. We can generate them beforehand based from the Headless CMS by retrieving all URLs. And we can do that using a next property. Let me just check. In Next.js docs, I have to search for generate static paths, or let me see, get static paths more likely. Okay. Yeah, we can export a function called get static paths in the dynamic routes page file. Let me just see. get static path. Yeah, excuse me, this is the old function. We need generate static params. Okay. And let's copy the usage actually, because it might be slightly different. I rewrite it to an arrow. Okay. Async function. Okay, and here what we do is fetch the box, all box, without any filters, and return a mapping box data map of the swags, where swag is block attributes swag. And what that will do, hopefully, if we test, now if we build the application, we will build all blog posts as static pages of build time. Let's wait for the optimized production build and we'll check if Next.js catches our static parameter. We do have an ESLint error, component definition is missing display name. To fix that, I can set button icon display name to icon. That should fix it. Let me run build again to check. So let's check what was generated. Generating static pages 0 of 5. That is absolutely correct, and our static paths are working. Why is that? Because if I open my Headless CMS, we have 4 blog posts plus the list homepage. And our static pages were generated. We actually have a console walk left over somewhere. Let me see where. I think right here, maybe? Yeah. Remove that. And now if I npm run start the application, it will actually run very fast because all of the pages are statically generated. You can see they are instantly shown. They're prefetched. Everything is working flawlessly. So that's the benefit of having them statically generated. The server does not do any API calls for them during the actual request. You just request a static page, the best possible performance. All right. Well, that's basically it. We have our blog. We made it from scratch, from the design. We built the front end styles, set up a headless CMS with Strapi. We didn't go too much in depth with Strapi, but you can experiment, and they have very good docs. And yeah, we use Next.js to integrate with the headless CMS, rebuild everything as static pages, and visualize all of the fields. That's it for today's video. If you like the content, don't forget to subscribe to get notified when another video is released. Take care.